Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking about mid-semester issues, particularly for 1Ls who are experiencing this possibly in a virtual environment. Your Law School Toolbox hosts today are Allison Monahan, that's me, and Lee Burgess. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so that you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. Together, we're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we would love to hear from you. With that, let's get started.
Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking about mid-semester issues, particularly in a virtual or hybrid law school environment. These are things I didn't even think I'd ever say to describe law school.
Right.
But, here
we are.
Here we are
in mid-September.
Yeah. Well, some of these topics are novel, but some aren't. There's always the October Freakout time for 1Ls. So, Allison, we've talked about this both on the blog and I think in other podcasts. So, what is the October Freakout?
Well, the October Freakout is basically that time in the fall when the novelty has worn off, the excitement, you're in law school, you're going to meet all these great people, it's so great, you're going to change the world. The novelty is worn off and the reality is setting in. This is really kind of hard and it's also kind of a slog. Every single day you're doing that reading for many hours a day. You're going to class, it's just, you've kind of gotten in the routine. It's not super novel. You also may have midterms coming up and that can cause a lot of stress because it's that moment of like, oh my gosh, have I really been doing what I need to do? And you're going to get feedback. Some people have probably gotten feedback on their first legal writing work, and that may not be the feedback they were hoping for. And also winter is coming, particularly, a lot of places where law schools are located, these are like serious winters. So winter is coming. And finals are also coming. So, I think that excitement of the August, September has kind of started to wear off. And you're not quite in the stress time of actual finals. And so people start to kind of freak out in October.
Yeah, it just seems to be like the leaves fall and it all of a sudden, like you look at the calendar and finals just aren't that many weeks away. I mean, I had somebody tell me a few days ago that I think Christmas was 100 days away or something like that. And I had this very visceral reaction to that reality.
Well, and also a lot of schools are moving, they're compressing the calendar. So
True. People
are going to have exams sooner than they would normally.
Yeah.
But, even in like a normal lifetime where we didn't know what a great job, what a great law school experience we were actually having. Like I remember October and having this massive meltdown about not being able to find a summer job, which do not worry about that right now.
Right. Don't worry about that.
And this 2L, I literally went home after talking to someone in, I think it was like it wasn't career services because we couldn't talk to them yet, but someone in the public interest organization, whatever. They were very mean to me. And I literally went home in tears. And this 2L who was talking to my roommate was just like, okay, you got to get a grip. Like everyone goes through this. You're having this freak out. It's totally normal. You need to take the rest of the day off. I remember it was a Friday and just go walk around the city. Like it's beautiful right now. It's fall in New York City. It is a perfect day. Just take the day off. And I listen, I do. That's one of my clearest memories of my 1L year is walking around New York City that afternoon. And it was so beautiful. And he was right. It was perfect. It was like the perfect leaves are falling, the blue sky, like fall is coming. And that was a totally good decision. But I was absolutely having a freak out.
Yeah, I think it's totally normal. And I think this virtual world, also, like, let's just take a second about, like, time has very strange meanings right now, too.
True.
So I feel like this virtual world and this, whether or not you're completely virtual or in some sort of hybrid situation or you're only on campus a day or two a week. I think that this, the odd nature of this semester is also going to make time have a bit of a different meaning because you might be feeling like you're getting less support because you're not in a social environment where you're hanging out with people. A lot of that 1L experience is a social one. And there's a little bit of like, you're all in this together and you all are still in this together. You just may not be physically together. And that's got to be a little bit weird. And sometimes that isolation can make things more difficult.
Right, exactly. I mean, in the story I just told, you know, the 2L would not be there because I would never have met this person, and my roommate would never have met this person because how would we in a virtual class?
Right, exactly. And then, you know, it might be harder to feel connected to professors or even TAs. I'm not sure how a lot of schools are handling the teaching assistant role in this virtual world. But, you know, you're not bumping into anybody. You can't go hang outside somebody's office necessarily. You know, I've been getting feedback from the professors I've interacted with that they are still hoping that students will show up for their virtual office hours or reach out to them. And they have actually communicated to me that students are not engaging as much or not initiating that engagement, that maybe this, you know, the virtual world feels a little cold to them, or they're just not, I don't know, maybe I think for some people, reaching out virtually would seem easier because they can find professors intimidating. But regardless, professors feel like students aren't engaging. So if you feel that it's hard to engage in the virtual world, just know that on the other side of that laptop, there is a human who would like to talk to you. Right. They are probably also lonely and miss student interaction.
And they're being paid to talk to you. So you may as well take advantage.
That too. Yeah. I think another tough thing, depending on how well your professor is doing with this virtual classroom or a hybrid classroom, is that class may be less engaging. I mean, we have been running a virtual business for 9 years now, almost a decade. Doing online curriculum that is engaging is not easy. We have learned that. We have learned that the hard way. Go back and listen to some early podcast episodes. Fortunately, I think we've taken down a lot of our early course content.
We've revamped it to be better.
Revamped. We have learned many valuable lessons, but this is not easy to do. A lot of people aren't comfortable in this format, and I think you're going to have to give your professors a bit of grace if they're struggling. But it may be hard to stay engaged if either they're hard to follow online or they're boring. You know, I mean, who knows what the issues are? But I think that can be tough for people too.
Oh, definitely. I mean, even just, you know, having that Zoom environment of lots of people and you can't quite tell necessarily who's going to be talking. And I do a virtual cooking class with my friend who is in Italy at the moment. And, you know, that's fun, but it's really hard to keep track of who's saying what. And, you know, particularly in a smaller group environment, I think that can be difficult on a screen.
Yeah, it really can be. And sometimes it just depends on the day. I mean, I've had, you know, some group meetings that have gone amazing. I had one with our team today with that was fairly collaborative, and you know, everybody was engaged and just having a great discussion. But I've also hosted plenty of meetings that are a disaster, that everyone looks exhausted and zoomed out. And I mean, this is challenging. We're all trying to find our footing. And so, you know, I think being kind to yourself and knowing that if you're struggling engaging in class, that's, you know, it's not necessarily that something's wrong with you. However, you're going to still be required to know what's being discussed in class. So you got to find a way around it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, you want to be paying attention as much as you can. And then anything you're not clear on, follow up in those virtual office hours or send your professor an email because they are there to help you. Yeah.
I think work-life balance issues, and then I don't know, I feel like we need a new category, work-life mental health balance issues because of the state of the world. You know, I think everybody's life in some ways sometimes has become simpler, but oftentimes has become more complicated with the new restrictions around COVID, especially if you have children or if you're caring for someone in this really crazy time. But finding balance and focus is, I think, even more challenging than it used to be, considering we don't do anything. But I definitely feel busy and stressed out, and I can't.
Right. Well, I think
I can't go out.
Yeah, there's so much less separation, you know, when you're working from home and studying from home and socializing from home. And, you know, California, we're just coming off of literally a month of horrible smoke where we basically many days have literally not been able to leave the house. So I think for people who are trying to negotiate, you know, when does my studying stop? When does my work stop? When does my life start? What does my life look like? What do I do? And, you know, the hours a day that I don't have to be working or studying, but I can't leave the house. You know?
It's true. I mean, it's crazy. It's really hard. I did virtual yoga for the first time in 3.5 weeks. And I swear I could hear my body cracking. It was really not okay. I was I'm sorry, body. It's been a rough few weeks. face.
No, literally, I was trying to do something yesterday after I took a walk yesterday because the air finally cleared. Thank goodness.
Oh my gosh,
and
magic.
I was like, my leg doesn't work anymore. I'm like, my hip is not functioning right now. I need to do something.
I know. I'm supposed to do one of my exercise bike rides today, and we will see if I said, because I'd also, the air quality, I mean, for people outside of California, the air quality has just been to the point where I wouldn't exercise indoors with air filters because it was still like really uncomfortable. And so, but then you just you get off these habits, and then just restarting these self-care habits are so challenging in the best of circumstances. There really is. So, having a lot of grace with yourself, but also just making sure that in this, when you are, studying from home, taking classes from home, socializing from home, doing life stuff at home, that you do try and figure out how to create some sort of balance. I think you still need a study schedule. And if you're struggling either finding time to do things or finding that balance, then you need to talk to somebody and figure it out, because, school's only going to get a little busier and a little more stressful as you march towards the end of the semester.
Yeah. And I think in terms of talking to someone, I think it's also unfortunately harder to have that study group experience, if people are generally used to going and every 2 days a week you cram yourself in the library room with your 3 friends and you guys study for 8 straight hours. I mean, you can do things online, but definitely it's going to be a different experience. And we have a post about a virtual study group, and I think that's great, but it's just going to be a different experience.
Yeah, and the Zoom fatigue is real, right? I think it's just how many hours can you video chat with people? Even I have a good group of girlfriends. We're all pretty busy. And many of us, talk to people during the day, and we were trying to have a Zoom happy hour, and we have nothing to say to each other by the end of the day. Everybody's so tired, it's 9:00 and we're all just like, what's going on? And then we're all kind of, and then it was just wah, wah. I think we hung up because we were just zoomed out. We couldn't, we had nothing left in the tank for the socializing piece.
Yeah. I think it's hard to balance everything. And I think you should do your best, and one day might be better, 1 week might be better. But I think just keeping these things in mind, if you realize at some point that you haven't left the house for a week, and you haven't talked to anyone and you haven't really done anything but study, I don't think that's sustainable.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's not. So, what should people be thinking about? I mean, so it's October, you're like, okay, maybe I have midterms coming up. How do you even start this evaluation process to see how things are going?
Well, I think this is a great time to do 2 things. I think one, you want to look backwards and really evaluate, how are the basics going? Are you keeping up with your reading? Are you understanding the cases? Do you do some type of brief or something to capture this? And are you able to participate in class? Or do your class notes generally make sense? All of those kind of things. They're just the basic sort of day-to-day law school experience. How's that going? Are you getting enough out of it? And also, how long is it taking? Because I think at this point, you're, say, 6-ish weeks in at least, and it shouldn't be taking you, insane amounts of time to do your reading. If it's taking you 6 hours to do your reading for one class, that is problematic. You don't have that much time. So I think I would look backwards and say, how are things going? Are there things I need to change? Am I getting the most bang for my buck? Maybe if you're doing extensive written briefs, this might be a good time to evaluate if that's really necessary or helpful. Because the other thing you've got to do is look forward, and that gets into the deep work.
Right. Yeah. And I think that the deep work, this is where you have to really be honest with yourself about whether you're doing deep work or busy work.
Right.
Because I think I made this mistake of myself as a 1L. It's very easy to just do busy work and think that it's deep work because you haven't yet taken exams. But if you're preparing for midterms, especially, you want to be setting aside time to really be, wrestling with material, making outlines, doing practice exams, all of that kind of stuff, really testing your knowledge and not just passively doing work like retyping your class notes or something along those lines.
Rereading cases, that's my favorite.
Rereading cases. Reading multiple supplements, that's my other favorite one.
Yeah. Sorry. No, that one's always good. Yeah, and I think, speaking of supplements, I think this is also a good time to evaluate, do you need a supplement? And I know your professors will probably tell you don't. I would probably not listen to them.
Right.
And by a supplement, it could be a commercial outline, but it could also be something like an examples and explanations book where you're really starting to engage with that material. I think those are so helpful, particularly the ones that we really like the Torch and the Civ Pro. They're fantastic. You should get them. But that's just not passive work. That's work where you're sitting down, you're getting a new explanation, you're engaging with material, you're checking yourself. I think that's highly valuable at this point.
Yeah, I think that it is. And, I think this also might be a situation where, depending on how your school is doing their library, it might be a little more challenging to even get access to supplements. So you might want to see what you could purchase that you could review on your iPad or on your computer. I think it's unfortunately maybe a little bit tougher to try out different supplements. So maybe,
although I have heard certain schools and certain organizations, certain publishers are actually giving electronic access. So that's definitely something worth looking at. And if you can save yourself some cash, not having to buy or rent some supplements, that's great. But, really dig in with your librarians. What do you guys have to offer? I can't come to the library now for these books. What do you have? And oftentimes I think they will have something.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. All right. LRW also is something that usually happens in the fall that I think scares everybody.
Yeah.
Because you might be getting some early feedback. You might find that even, if you were, a good writer, that you are humbled by your LRW feedback. So you can't be demoralized by it, but you do also need to wrestle with that feedback and meet with your professor and figure out what went wrong because, it's possible that wasn't a graded assignment. Your graded assignment is coming down the pipe.
Right. And I think that's also something, again, look forward and look backwards. Look back at what feedback have you gotten so far, really take that to heart, but also look forward at your scheduling particularly. When do you have assignments coming up? Because that's one of those things that can absolutely eat up your time. And I think you have to be really diligent and rigorous about not letting legal writing totally take over your life right at the point at which, you need to be studying for other things.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And I think that's a huge mistake. Because oftentimes legal writing is a smaller number of units than even some of your larger doctrinal classes,
or ungraded,
but it becomes so big because it's work and it's so much easier to work on those assignments than it is to work on abstract things like midterms or outlines or practice exams.
I'm going to get this totally perfect, It's well, if it's 98% perfect, it's probably perfect enough and you should probably go do some case reading.
Right. Exactly. So, and the 1L professors all know when the LRW assignments are due and they get so angry when students are not prepared for class
or don't show
around
up
times or don't show up. Yeah. So don't do that.
Yeah.
Because they notice.
No, I mean, I've heard of professors even basically telling people what's going to be on the exam on days that they knew a lot of people were going to miss just out of spite, essentially. Yeah. And it's you should be in that class, particularly if it's virtual. There's really no excuse.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is you absolutely cannot procrastinate on these LRW assignments. That's what kills people is when they procrastinate and then they don't have time to do things that frankly, in the whole scheme of things are not that hard, like Blue Book citations. You got into law school, you can learn to do the Blue Book. It's just really sad when people have spent all of this time and energy with these arguments and digging into all this stuff, and then they screw up their citations and they get a C,
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. Ugh, you need a plan. Yeah. You need a plan to get it all done.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we've talked a little bit about what's happened to our mental and physical health during the last month of living in California. But guys, we've all got to really be serious about this because not only, of course, is our own physical and immune health so critically important during this time, but you've also just got to be constantly checking in with yourself. And I think, if your school is providing some sort of maybe virtual therapy or anything like that, and it's free, I would just schedule a session.
I agree.
To check in.
Yeah. Even if you think you're fine.
Even if you think you're fine. To be honest, I have a monthly therapy session booked with my therapist. Sometimes I don't go. But there's something about having it hanging out there on the calendar to just have somebody ask you questions that maybe you're not going to ask yourself. There's just something out there, and I think that we are all under such an immense amount of stress. I mean, I'm sure everybody listening to this is also reading all the same articles you and I are sharing with each other on like the New York Times and everything about what this amount of ongoing stress is doing to ourselves mentally.
Right.
And so everybody's struggling, but you just want to make sure that you're coping. I think that's all we can really do right now is cope.
Right. And I think, at this time in people's lives, it's a great time to talk to someone and get better coping skills because, you're entering a profession that is highly stressful at the best of times. And these are skills that you're going to need for the rest of your life. I mean, I, swear up and down that one of the best decisions I ever made was starting therapy my first year of law school because it really allowed me to have that understanding and those tools that I've carried through forever. And, it was literally life-changing. So I agree. I think, take advantage of those resources, even if you think, hey, relatively speaking, I'm doing pretty okay. Because the reality is none of us are really doing that great right now.
No, I mean, these times are insane. They're absolutely insane. And I just think that if nothing else, just taking that pause to reflect on how you're doing. Because I think the other thing, because time is such a weird construct right now, we're not taking a lot of time to like check in with ourselves. And many of us aren't even interacting with many of our friends who we're used to checking in with.
Right.
And so I think that, any sort of standing meeting, and if you don't feel comfortable going to a therapist, maybe with a friend, I mean, Alison, you and I always have our check-ins on Monday. And sometimes I feel like we're just doing our own little like decompression about what is going on in our lives,
When we cancel, I'm like, oh, I don't have anybody to talk to this week.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm like, wait, but Monday's the day where we debrief the weekend and we look towards the week and we like get our act together. And, so I think that having any of that just on your calendar is just part of managing, mental health and just mental function during this time. And physical health, this is a tough one, especially if you are somebody who's used to going to the gym or going to group classes and all that stuff. And if you've been, saying like, I can't make myself do this at home. I can't. It's just a great time to try. It's a great time to try.
Well, and also to look at options. Before the smoke apocalypse, I was actually doing an outdoor yoga class and I was doing an outdoor boxing class, and that was great. I loved it. And then all that went away and now I've done nothing. But, there may be choices or maybe options for you. And it's all, totally possible. Some of these are through your school too. Like I know that Columbia had a ton of gym classes we could sign up for. And I would have to imagine, some of those maybe are still happening. I don't know.
Yeah.
But hopefully some things are still happening while the weather isn't too terrible.
Yeah, I know, right? Got to get creative.
Or maybe you could just get like an accountability partner, someone who is near you and you guys can agree that you're going to go. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It could literally just be a 30-minute walk. I think that would be amazing for most people's physical and mental health at this point.
Yeah, it really would be. And I think one of the things I have learned is like really small goals, right. Like if you can't do 30 minutes, try 20 minutes.
Right. Try 10.
I mean, or 10. Like I play this game with myself almost all the time, but just, I think especially as overachievers or people who are perfectionists, I mean, the personality type that goes to law school, it's like, well, I can't work out if I don't have an hour to work out. It's like, well, you don't need to work out for an hour, take a 30-minute walk, 15-minute walk. Any walk is better than no walk.
Right. Or I have some kettlebells in my house and sometimes I'm like, I could just do 5 minutes of that. That would actually be kind of not beneficial. Yeah, it's funny. I got the Apple Watch and I was doing pretty well in like the moderate exercise setting before all this smoke stuff happened. I was basically consistently fulfilling my exercise goals for the day. So, of course, being a type A overachiever, I decided that the next step is obviously to up my goal, right? I mean,
right.
And so at that point, I started not meeting the goal and getting demoralized and doing nothing.
Right. Totally true.
So I went back to like the moderate goal and then I started exceeding it again when basically ended up at the same point I was trying to reach at the higher goal. It was eye-opening, I have to say.
Yeah, it is really interesting, these kind of like games we have to play with ourselves.
Yeah.
I've learned for me, because I jumped on the Peloton bandwagon. And one of the things that the Peloton app does, which I think is kind of fascinating and a great user interface is it makes it really hard to exit out of a class once you start one. It's not intuitive. And so I think it's great. It's like you just bite off your 15 minutes or your 20 minutes or your 30 minutes, but like you're stuck.
Right.
There's no quick exit button. You have to click like multiple things to get
like,
out.
Are you really sure you want to quit? Are you that lazy?
Like you don't, right. You don't have 30 minutes out of a 24-hour day.
Is there an emergency situation happening right now, Lee? I don't think so. Stay on the bike.
Totally. So, but I've even done they've got meditation and yoga, and I've done some of their other like classes. It's the same thing. It's like, you're just in it, you just press the button and you're just in it. So if you're one of those people who needs to like hand yourself over to someone else, I do think that they're getting better and better at these virtual offerings to make it so, you just sign up for your 30-minute slot and then you're in it. You're in it for 30 minutes and then, that's how it is.
Yeah, all these companies are pretty good at motivating you at this point. Even if you kind of hate it and you know what they're doing, it still works.
Exactly. So, and now I feel all sorts of accountability that I have talked so much about my Peloton that I haven't seen in a few weeks, and it's blue skies. I am going to do that workout when I get back from the office today.
Nice.
I'm going to do it. My accountability partner, everybody who's listening. Hopefully it will have been done by the time
we'll check in. I'll be like, Lee, did you do this?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it may seem silly that, you have to spend this much mental energy to make yourself relatively healthy and stable in this world. But I think this is time worth spending, because the reality is, if you are in a better mental state, if you're in better physical health, you're going to be doing better in everything else, So if you are sick and you are depressed and you're anxious, you're not going to really be able to succeed as a student, because you've just put all these other problems in play.
Yeah. One more story. So my kids haven't been sleeping great the last few nights. So I've been very tired. And I was trying to memorize a phone number yesterday because like my copy and paste on my phone wouldn't work. And I like read a phone number and then I needed to text somebody. Oh my gosh. I could not remember a phone number to save my life.
Yeah.
I kept like flopping the last two numbers. It was like taking me forever. And it was just such a good, like, I was tired, I was flustered, and it was just such a great example of like, I had to take a moment where I was like, my brain is not functioning correctly. Like, and I just have to like figure out how to get to the other side of this. And it was such an interesting reminder of like, we can only function as well as like our bodies and our minds are doing at that moment. So we have to do whatever we can. So if anyone wants to tell me how to make my kids sleep more, that'd be amazing. But I can only control them so much. But I can control the things I can control.
Right.
So that's,
and
that's
you
all
can make sure you have paper to write down the number. So
right. I know. I didn't have a pen in my purse. I didn't have a piece of paper. It was all just, I have like 16 masks, but I don't have a pen and a paper.
Well, at least you have those. Well, I think a lot of it is just mental overhead of making sure you have all these, just to leave the house. It's not like you just leave the house these days. So, you've got mental overhead for everything you're doing. And that mental overhead is taking away from things like your working memory.
Right.
That's just the basics of like how the brain works. You only have so much capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are finding that your school is not able to provide you these types of resources to help you, manage your time, figure out how to get feedback from your professors, all that stuff. I mean, our tutors are working with students to come up with these solutions, and your school may still be figuring out how to offer things like academic support virtually. So ask the school, but I think this is a good time, this October timeframe, if you're feeling lost, to go get those resources, because you don't want to try and reach out in November. And, as you're marching towards finals, it can feel, you can get help, and that's great. But this is a magic time to get help.
Right. I think this is the time where you still have enough time to really, not be in a crazy frazzled state when you're preparing for exams. But the time is rapidly getting shorter. So this is the perfect time to look at what support do you need that you don't have. Are there people that you need help from? Are there things like old exams that you don't have access to? Like, what if your professor doesn't have these on file? This is the time to really be digging into that, because all this other stuff is going to happen really quickly.
Yeah. All right. A lot of people ask in October what their outlining goals should be. Are they supposed to be outlining? Are they supposed to be practicing? And the answer is kind of yes. Yeah. Yes, you should.
You've covered enough material at this point. You're not going back to it. Figure out what you've covered. Look at your syllabus. You've got some topics. You should start outlining those topics, or making flowcharts, or doing whatever it is that makes sense to you. And then you should start doing some practice hypos, employing those topics, because that's how you're going to learn to take these exams.
Yeah, especially if you do not have midterms, you need to basically make your own midterms.
Right.
So you don't wait until the end of the semester to start practicing this early material.
Well, and I think you need to figure out some way to get feedback, because the reality is you don't know what you're doing. So you might think that you've done an amazing job and that it's pretty close to the sample answer, or you might not even have a sample answer, but you need to confirm that with someone.
Yeah, that's very true. And if your prof doesn't have stuff on file, I think it's a good time to see if your school has other professors practice exams for a similar class. So if you have a new contracts professor, it's possible that their exam might look a lot like the other contracts professors' exams because they are probably going to be covering similar material. You can use bar questions, you can use supplements, but you're going to still need to practice. You don't get to just say, I can't do practice exams because I don't have my old professor's questions.
Right. One thing I think you have to keep in mind too is it's totally possible the format of your exam is going to look quite different from exams that even a professor who's taught for 20 years has given before. So if you're doing virtual school, you're probably not going to have an in-class or closed book exam this semester. So you've really got to think through like what changes might they make to be able to curve an exam that is online, take home, open book instead of 3 hours in class.
Yeah. And if they haven't shared any information with you yet about the exam in class, that's a great icebreaker to go to office hours about.
Right.
They would rather talk to you about the format of the exam now than they would in November. They're going to get cranky about people who flood their office hours at the end with all these very specific questions. But they are, pleased when people come early to ask these questions because then you get credit for thinking ahead.
Right. And if they tell you they haven't decided, then I think that at some point becomes cause for concern.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's true. So basically, I think the moral of the story is, hey, it's October. Finals aren't that far away. Time to evaluate what you're doing and talk to your professors.
Right. And get the help that you need to make sure that you're going to be prepared for these exams that are going to be in a format that you're probably not ever really taken before.
Yeah.
And of course, has most of your grade writing on it, not to frighten anyone.
Yeah. Because it's strange times. So why wouldn't this be strange too?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, with that, I think we are out of time. Any final thoughts you want to share on this?
I think just have a little grace for yourself and for everyone else. I think one of the things I'm really trying to work on is giving everybody, more chances before I get frustrated than I used to. So it's possible I am not the most patient person in the world. And so, oftentimes I'm trying to double my patience for everything. It's like somebody doesn't respond to me, instead of getting mad, I just double my patience. I just follow up one more time. And so I think just having grace with your professors who are probably working in an environment they're not particularly comfortable with, grace for your friends who may be slow to respond, just trying to have a little bit of grace for yourself, I think no one is performing at their best in this situation. And so just having just taking that extra beat, I think can make things run a little smoother. I'm feeling much better now that I just give everyone more chances than I used to do everything right, including myself.
Well, I think that's a great takeaway. And probably that makes you have everything less personally.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah, it's not that they ignored you because they hate you. They were just busy.
Right.
It's probably a better way to go through life. Let's face it. All right. Well, if you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app. We would really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee or Alison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com. Or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.